have the check, I would call her, and she can either come and get the, contract and the check like she wants or whatever. Okay, well, you can give her that information, but she called today and checked her and said she was back at work. And I told her I would see it, and I'll let her know that she would get with her now.
All right. What's her name? That one from China?
I don't know,
Something there. What's that building from China?
Yeah.
Food or something like that.
It does begin with the F. I can't remember what it is. And I heard him say it on the news probably a million times.
That's like what I do. First stop was Vegas.
Went on for example, so then I might turn that one around.
You should have everything now.
Okay, thank you.
God, I could do one for tomorrow.
Paul Ballard?
No.
Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Trustees special meeting, Wednesday, December the 9th, 2020 at 5 o'clock p.m. I call this meeting to order. Public hearing requirements. Before entering this building, your temperature was taken. If your temperature had been over 100.4 or higher, you would not have been permitted to enter the building. The use of face masks is required. We will provide throwaway face masks for your convenience. Social distancing is required. Chairs will be set up according to the health department recommendations. Please do not move the chairs from the designated spot. Hand sanitizer is provided. We would appreciate it if you would use it. When this public hearing or this meeting has concluded, please exit the building immediately. Thank you. Please stand for the invocation.
I'd like to bow your heads again. Dear Lord, thank you for this day and thank you for the citizens here. Be with us tonight. Help us have wisdom. Be with those who protect our rights and freedoms that we have here. That you would be with them and be with the families that miss them when they're gone. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All the roll, please.
Jeff Johnson.
Here.
Randy Moore.
Here.
John Carlisle.
Here. Need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Johnson moved. Is there a second? Mr. Ford second. Discussion. Roll call.
Jeff Johnson.
Yes.
Randy Moore.
Yes.
John Carlisle.
Yes. Minutes. I'm going to move to approve the October 28th, 2020 special, the November 19th, 2020 special, the December 1st, 2020 regular, the December 5th, 2020 special, and the December 7th, 2020 special meeting minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Johnson, second. Discussion? Roll call.
Jeff Johnson.
Yes.
Randy Ford.
Yes.
Tom Carlisle.
Yes. Okay, old business. This is the application submitted by Pulte Homes of Ohio for 155.281 acres located at 14141, 14897, and 13541 Palmer Road, owned by Charles L. Tagey, trustee, to rezone from the Agricultural District AG with a PRC overlay to Planned Mixed Use Development District PMUD. We had met on the public hearing on this on October the 28th. Mr. Ford, Mr. Johnson, you can jump in any time. My notes, that the issues that were raised were the roads connecting to New England Acres and to Shevington Woods, the schools, the density of the proposed PMUD, and the drainage issues. Those are the four, I guess those would be the four top and not in any order. Do you have anything to add?
You have traffic?
I kind of have that as a road, we didn't be.
Same thing.
Well, it could be or couldn't be. The roads were the issue that I had was the stub streets from New England Acres and Shevington Woods into this development. Traffic was a concern as far as Palmer Road and the traffic light at Mink and Palmer.
Yeah, increased traffic.
Increased traffic, so, I can't think of anything else. Those are the five issues. Before we get started, Mr. Pulte, Mr. Hart, you're here representing Pulte, Mr. Callahan, Mr. Weber, is that correct? Okay. If you would like to give us like a 3 to 5 minute or less recap on your side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and trustees. I guess I'd like to give a recap, but we have made two major changes to the plan since the last hearing. And we would like to cover that real briefly, if that's okay. We have altered the plan.
Yeah, you can present it.
Okay.
Sure. You have it with you?
I do. I'd like to approach and pass this out.
Sure.
What we're passing out are an updated text with the highlights of what's changed since the last hearing, as well as an updated plan that takes those changes into the map in the real world scenario. The map is also the map we have on display, and I guess what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, if that's okay, is just briefly hit some of the highlights of these changes, and then Matt Callahan would like to kind of walk through the site plan, how it's different, very briefly.
Before
Yes,
we
sir.
go too far on that, briefly, if you would, tell me what these changes are, because if that's the case, and you're amending too much, or if these are amendments that were, clarifications, that's fine. Otherwise, we're not allowing the public to speak on behalf of these changes. So, you need to describe what those are before we go much further.
Sure, appreciate that. Well, first I would say there are changes that respond to the public, that respond to what you just laid out were the issues in the last hearing. So many of the changes that are detailed in the text that are highlighted are things that we, going back to October, and really changes we outlined at the last hearing and have been in the works for a while. We actually put them into the text in writing. The main change in the plan itself is a drop in density from 365 units to 355, another 10-unit drop. That makes 21 units total dropped since the zoning commission recommended us. That's the biggest change. With that comes some detail on open space. That allows us to get to 40% open space. We were at 37% before. We're now at 62 acres total open space, 40%. That allows us to change the buffers. Now we have a buffer on the east side and the south side of the site that are 100 feet buffer between the end of our lot areas and the neighboring property lines. We also increased the buffer, the setback from Palmer Road to 200 feet to the fronts of the homes. So we have a nice rural buffer feel there. The changes make our density go from 2.96 to 2.88 net. The gross density would be 2.31, which is really more. It's what you see in the real world. It's really more of a real feel to what we'll build. So those are the detailed changes. We've also come up with the thought that we talked to the county engineer as well as the regional planning commission chair, Licking County, and we will be filing, if we're approved for zoning, in the final development plan, final engineering process, we'll file for variances to the subdivision regs to allow the stub streets to be one way. So we're talking about Old Post and Cape Cod Way being one way only to the north into the subdivision. So, and then Faneuil Hall would be one way to the west into the subdivision. In other words, our people couldn't cut through theirs, but they could cut through ours. And really what it does, we're gonna be making major improvements along Palmer Road with turn lanes, and that makes all of our traffic go to Palmer Road. Those stubs would still be emergency access both ways. We would file the variance with the idea that this build-out's between 6, 7, 8 years, depending on recessions and economy and market. And at the end of that period, we'd have the county, we filed the variance with a review at the end of that period, because we know that there are other major improvements coming with traffic in the general area, and whether cut through would still be an issue or a threat at that time. I mean, there might even be more connections, with other developments. So I want to state very clearly, very succinctly in the record that there's no guarantee the county is going to approve that one-way condition for those 3 stubs. But we have talked to them, we've talked to the engineer, and we are going to file it. We're going to file it that way in engineering if we're approved. So those are the major changes. Matt can walk. Yes, sir.
No. You don't have to raise your hand for him.
Okay. You've not applied for the variance yet? I just
No.
want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
You're saying you apply for it if the zoning's approved,
Yes.
but there's
yes.
no guarantee that the variance will be approved.
That's right. We wouldn't, if we don't have a zoning, we don't have a business, we don't have a plan. Most of final engineering, subdivision regulation compliance, stormwater details, traffic details, all the engineering we do on the site come with the final development plan, final engineering process. That's when we go through all the county regulation with fine detail. It's zoning, we have preliminary information only, really. So we have to get approved for zoning to be able to spend the money and to do all the very detailed engineering. It's essentially a 2-step process. But that development plan does come back here, and the engineering plans go through the county review process with all their agencies.
Okay.
But we have talked to the executive of the Licking County Regional Planning Commission as well as the engineer. I think the engineer would be supportive. We'd be making our case for that one-way condition at regional planning.
Dennis, how you proceed? Did you get off your train of thought?
No, sir, I would, if it's okay, I'd like Matt to walk through just some of the other basics of the site plan changes.
Cal?
Good evening, and thank you again for having us. I'd like to do two things if I could. Starting out, I'd like to, one, pass out a summary of the changes that we've made throughout the process for your review and records. And then what I'd like to do is turn this board around so I can point to the site plan as I point out some of these changes, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
So just real quickly, I'm not going to read everything that I passed out, but it is a summary of the list of the changes that we've made throughout this process, starting from when we first presented this to the township through the zoning commission and up to this point, including our last hearing with this board. Tom already hit on most of these, so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but in terms of the plan changes, a couple of things we were able to do. If you went back and look at the old plan, there was not a consistent setback here along Palmer Road. What we did is we moved everything back and made this a consistent.
Mr. Callahan, can I ask you to move that on the other side? Mr. Evans is trying to stream this live.
We get to, we can move this.
Sorry, Mark.
Oh, I appreciate it, thank you.
Sorry, I was kind of pointing you here,
Is that better?
Yep.
but, okay.
Okay, Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry.
No, understood, good call. I probably can reach it better. So yeah, that's this 200-foot setback is shown on the plan, but that'll increase the kind of rural feel and rural character coming down with a large setback along Palmer Road. As Tom said here, the setbacks on this eastern border as well as the southern border have also been increased to 100 feet now. A couple of the other things that we did, these are subtle changes, and you may not recognize them at first, but we did things like we created these open spaces on the end of these blocks. Particularly here, when you come in at this main entry, what you're gonna see is you're gonna see a green space, and that creates a nice vista and view into the community. So we tried to do that as much as we could throughout the community, where this isn't really a change, but it's another good example of it terminating on a green space. Here again, you've got a bunch of green space on the corners. So we've incorporated all these additional open spaces and green spaces to better the flow and openness of the community. And that reduction in density and moving around the project and getting to 40% is what allows us to do that. I'll just quickly point out some of the things that haven't changed, particularly in the empty nester patio home sub area. All of the lots still back onto all the open space, or every one of those lots back onto an open space, and a good deal of the single family do, of course, as well. And also the pedestrian paths. We've talked about that kind of extensively, but incorporated through that 40% open space or the nearly 1.8 miles of pedestrian pathways throughout the community. I think that's the highlights. Be happy to answer any questions on that. Just wanted to point those out as we got started here this evening.
No. I got another brief little recap then. Mr. Chairman, we are prepared to address some of the school issues that were raised as well, but whenever, as well as the recap. But in terms of the recap, there's a reality to zoning and density and standards and zoning code that relates to the market. A density code, a set of standards in a township or a city or a county really sets the market for land value. When you have code sections that say the density limits are X, that's a market assumption that's built into pricing of ground in any jurisdiction. The trustees are being asked over and over again during the hearing process to ignore that, to ignore that we meet the code, that we're under density, and that's key in setting property value in this township. The trustees are being asked not to follow the code and a code compliant density and plan that we presented. Denying property owners legal zoning and code compliant density and with development standards that we meet will have several negative consequences if that's what happens. It sends a message to property owners that you can't expect to gain the value that your land is worth in the market. There's a homeowner analogy here. It'd be like if I owned a house for years and I built equity in it because the market got better, and I tried to sell it and somebody said, no, we're not gonna let you sell it for that value. You're gonna have to sell it for less because your neighbors don't like that.
I don't believe that's what the people are asking us to do. I don't think they're asking us to ignore the code. I think what they're asking us to do is enforce the PRCD overlay as it sits today. I don't think they're asking us to ignore the code at all. I think that's a misconception.
Well,
I mean, that's my opinion. Jeff, Randy?
I did note several witnesses who said exactly that. Just Mr. Hagee can just lower his property value. That's their solution. And
I understand that, but I don't believe that the public that was saying that they wanted us to ignore the code or ignore the law or ignore the zoning resolution as it sits today. I think that's an unfair statement. I think they're looking at it as they want us to listen to what they're having to say. And I mean, you may have viewed it as the code. I look at it as they're concerned about what's going to happen if it's not PRCD, what's next. So, and I don't think they're asking us to ignore it. I don't think the public, if that's the way it came across, I don't think that's what they meant. Let's put it that way.
No, I think there was one resident who mentioned that, and my interpretation was, with this number, if you have to have this many houses to make it profitable, then maybe Mr. Hagee needs to lower his price of the land so that you can build fewer houses and still make a profit.
But
That
John,
was my interpretation.
yes, sir. Respectfully, it's a distinction without a difference. You have 4 code sections that could be applied to this property, and you have straight zoning that could be applied. To continually insist, as many witnesses did, that it can only be PRCD and nothing else but PRCD, it has the same effect of lowering the property value because you're wiping out all the other available zoning categories that are allowable and legal under the code.
They're allowable if they're approved.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But I guess my point is, there are densities assumed in all those categories, and those densities do set the market. They do set property value in the district.
We get that.
Okay.
Can I ask one other question before you?
Yes, sir.
You said a couple times that you meet the code. Can you expound on that?
Sure.
Explain what are you saying you meet the current code?
Yes.
What I'd like to do, Mr. Ford, if you don't mind, if we could let him get through his and we can go back and revisit. it.
Okay, that's fine.
And then we can start asking the pointed questions.
That's
I don't
fine.
want him to lose his train of thought, plus I want to allow him to finish before we get started.
Okay.
Are you all right?
I'm fine with that, yep.
That was my next point, my concluding point, that we meet every aspect of the development standards in the code. We meet, the PMUD code section itself doesn't have a density limit, but the code also makes an analogy and says the PRD section of the code applies west of Mink. And we have essentially applied that logic and that set of standards to this PMUD because it's west of Mink. The PRD2 has a density limit of 3 units to the acre net. We're at 2.88. We chose the PMUD because the code allows that and because it allows a lot more flexibility. We're now at 40% open space, 40%, 62 acres. The PRD2 zoning category allows calls for, requires, I would argue, 15% open space. We're at 40. And so, you know, that's our main point, that you're getting a density that matches PRD2, you're getting open space that over-delivers almost 3 times PRD2, and we meet all the PRD2 standards in your code. So we're compliant with the comp plan, page 63 in this area, because it calls for suburban type densities. For someone to say and argue that this is urban density is flat out ridiculous. 2.88 is pretty standard suburban density anywhere in central Ohio. It sure isn't like the east side or downtown or anything, Grandview or anything like that. My last point is that this is an important precedent for the township and the area. It's a precedent that should be about high standards. It should be about enforcing your code. It should be about quality materials and updated housing. It should be about meeting density and over-delivering on open space and things like bike paths. Another thing we've committed to in the text is we'll agree to use the value of this property through the finance mechanisms and allow law to retrofit, put sidewalks in the Licking County part of New England Acres. We're gonna do traffic improvements on Palmer Road that'll fix more than just our access, it'll fix other issues with Palmer Road. We'll contribute to offsite intersections. All these things are good precedents. They're what you should expect from the development industry coming to your community and asking for approval. I got other points, but we'll save them, and we'll answer your questions, sir.
I mean, if you wanna go ahead, I mean, I would rather you get it finished than.
I can cover the school point as well if you'd like now.
Sure.
Obviously, any developer that comes into a community has to care about the school system, how it functions, how it operates. It's one of the major determinants of market value in Central Ohio. We are a school district region in terms of determining property value. So it matters a lot. We documented, and I have the documentation that we've sent that I can pass out. We've documented that there's 2 basic issues why we are a net positive in terms of operating revenue for the schools. Number 1 is our relatively high value. We're at a blended value per home here of about $324,000. That's well above the district average property value and generates significantly more than the district average in residential real property taxes that go directly to the schools. The second reason is our empty nester homes. What we did today, and we provided through the hearing, are examples of other empty nester home impacts in really significantly growth school districts like Hilliard and Olentangy, where very high value of the empty nester product reigns in the market with very few students coming into the school district. And again, we've provided that. I'll pass out our summary of it, if I may.
Are you providing enough copies of for passing as well?
Yes, sir. For that reason, we've done a projection of what the school impact would be, how many students would be generated, what the real property tax revenue to the schools would be. The district should like these kind of developments because when you blend empty nester with traditional single family at this high value, you're going to be able to educate kids who aren't coming out of this community. You're going to be able to overproduce the district average values for real property tax revenue. We have shared that information with the district, although that probably happened late tonight. And they can evaluate that. What we did is we looked at the district's typical cost to educate on average each student, then what our homes would produce in terms of real property tax, and then applied the millage. And the bottom line is our homes by themselves will produce about 84% of what it takes to educate each child just from real property tax, not commercial, not state money, not federal money, not, you know, utility money, not other grants or whatever. So we're well ahead of the average home in terms of revenue produced and students generated throughout the district. Now, those numbers are ours. We used them, we came up with them using public information from the district website, but the district should look at those. They should review those numbers and you know, make sure we're right. But we know our product, we know our competitor's product, Pulte does. We know a lot about empty nesters, and when you put 2 bedrooms down, you have limited floor space up. And here's the common sense point that is, I think facts are tough things to ignore. You know, we documented during this hearing that Chevington and New England Acres average values, the homes that are selling in the marketplace, are around between $253,000 and $263,000. Okay, those are typically, not all, but typically 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath homes. You know, our empty nester homes are gonna cost around $335,000 to start. So it's just a simple thing. Why would a family with kids buy a limited square footage empty nester home at $335,000 when the market offers them a 4-bedroom, you know, 2-story home with separated space in the 250s and 260s? I still believe that parents do what's in the best interest of their children and themselves, and, you know, having raised 3 kids, I appreciate the fact that I had some separation from my teenagers during those years, and I think that's what people do. The evidence, actual evidence we've given you from Hilliard and Olentangy documents that, backs it up.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Okay, Mr. Fuller, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, the question I have, Mr. Hart, was, you said we meet the standard. What was, you meet the current code, sorry. What code are you referring to? Are you referring to the PRCD, the ag with PRCD overlay, or are you referring to PMUD? What do you, I guess?
I'm referring to a combination of the PMUD, which allows a lot of flexibility, and really then the PRD2, because the PMUD allows us to get to 40% open space, okay? It allows us to blend empty nester housing with traditional family housing. That's the beauty of a mixed district. You know, you have, that district allows lots of open space in the mixing of these 2 products, which other code sections don't allow. For instance, PRCD is more multifamily oriented. That section is also designed to be used when there's no central sewer. It was, when it was written up as where you'd use spray effluent, you know, applied systems, you'd use alternative waste treatment. And that's a zoning district from days of yore. And in an area that has central sewer, you need to use central sewer. It's best for the environment, it's more efficient. But as we apply the standards of the PRD2 to a PMUD district, because the PRD2 has a lot more standards, a lot more development standards spelled out, we meet them all. If you go through those code sections, PRD2 and PMUD, we check all the boxes, including density.
But isn't the PMUD a flexible code that is done by negotiation through the township and the developer to come to a PMUD code in the section?
Yes, sir.
So you only meet the code basically if we say you meet the code, and that would be written in the text.
Well, I would answer yes. I would answer further though, what Matt passed out tonight as the sheet of all the changes we made, we never stopped negotiating. We never stopped
I'm just
listening.
saying that the PMUD code doesn't have a code. The PMUD is developed through negotiations between the township and the developer, and that's what becomes the code for that piece of property.
That's absolutely correct. That's the basis of a planned district, what you just articulated.
Does that answer your question?
But my only follow-up is also, because the PMUD doesn't have a lot of standards in it, it's almost fully negotiable. We did take a lot of the PRD2 actual development standards and put them into that text as starting points. Because your code also says PRD2 west of Main.
Well, Mink goes a long way. It
Yes.
goes from Preferably Road to the Fairfield County line, so I don't think it designated where that PRD2 was going to be, but that would do, it is basically an outline telling us that it's acceptable. But it's up to the township to decide where the PRD2 is acceptable. And that's the question. So even though it says west of Mink Road, it could be west of Mink Road, north of 40. We don't know. I mean, but that was a generalization of the state.
Yes, sir.
But point well taken. Jeff, you have anything?
What was it, when you originally came here to the zoning, board of zoning? Zoning commission? Yes.
Commission?
Yeah, how many lots did you have on that?
We were filed at that time at 376,
376, and now you're asking for
355.
55, so they asked for a reduction of 10%.
Yes, sir.
Which would 37 less. You didn't quite make that though?
We didn't, and I explained to the gentleman at zoning commission, I think he's here tonight, that 10% doesn't work in a business plan. It just doesn't work. The current zoning that's on the property as an overlay would yield somewhere around 350, roughly. So our point is, that kind of plan would almost have zero open space. It'd be very large lot zoning. We're presenting, sir, is we think our open space plan is better than the old pattern of development, because it's got bike paths, it's got buffers, it's got 40%, 62 acres.
Those were not in the zoning commission's hearing?
No, we presented the plan.
Okay.
Very similar. It had, at that time, it had about 37% open space, not 40. But that would, I would say, we did get I believe it was unanimous, John may.
I got it right here.
Okay.
You did, if you got 10%, I think it was unanimous. Yep, unanimous vote it says. No.
You got other questions? You want to just go through? You guys can just jump in anytime.
Okay.
And I have, go ahead, but I have stuff from the LCPC that I want to answer.
On the roads, I reviewed the traffic study, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that shows that either 40 to 50% of the traffic would be coming through Shevington Woods. Is that correct? In the traffic study?
Didn't think it was that high, but I'm gonna have to look it up. I don't remember.
There's nothing that goes through Shevington.
What's the one, I'm sorry, the one,
Maybe Violet Township.
the New England Acres Violet Township side? I thought that was Shevington Woods right in that area. That's not.
But it doesn't connect to Shevington.
Old Post and Cape Cod, is that still in New England Acres?
Yes, that's New England Acres, but Violet Township.
Thank you. The New England Acres Fairfield County side in the traffic study, if I read it correctly, shows that 40 to 50% of the traffic that's going to be entering this subdivision is going to come through New England Acres.
Matt may be able to find it while we're waiting, but my recollection is that traffic study had had the overwhelming majority of traffic going to Palmer from our site.
But
I wanna say it was
let's just say for the
75%.
sake of argument that I'm correct. So we're at 40 or 50%, let's just say 40%. And now you're doing one way in, so that's more than likely gonna cut it in half in the traffic. But what that does is that then spurs the requirement of a traffic light at Palmer and Main. So by reducing the traffic flow by one way in, in that traffic study, is that gonna require then? Is that where it's going to require a light, Palmer and Mink?
Whether it triggers a light is a function of the ODOT standards and review and the county engineer's
But
review.
that's it, it calls for you.
That we would, if we're sending more traffic to an offsite intersection, we would have a higher percentage of whatever that fix ends up being.
Okay. And then, the schools, their concern is the influx of growth. And, you stated that the public hearing, I believe it was an 8 to 10 year build out. And, I had mentioned this before, when I was facilitating meetings between New England Acres, and, Pulte. And it begs the question, if there's a 6, 7, 8 year, 10 year build out, would Pulte, because of the influx of growth in the schools, I guess the question I need to know is, where is your influx of building in this subdivision? Is it the first year, second year, 5th year, 8th year? I mean, you're not gonna build 355 homes in a year.
Correct.
So what is your potential? I mean, is it the first year, second year?
I can answer, but I mean, that period of time is affected by many things, you know.
Right, I understand that. I mean, there's an effect, but I'm sure you have some sort of an idea of what you're planning.
Yeah, what I would say is, for the traditional single family, we would project somewhere between 30 to 36 homes per year. And on the patio home, empty nester portion of the community, somewhere between 24 to 28 per year. So it would all come at a fairly even pace.
So it's safe to say total, you're gonna be anywhere between 45 to 75 homes a year?
Yeah,
Is that safe to say?
yeah.
Okay. Knowing that, I mean, and you look at, I'm just going to say, for the school, you're adding, and just say it's 1 child per home, you're adding 45 to 75 children to the school district in one year. Do that over the course of 5 years, you're looking at, 350 kids, in the school system. I understand the influx of growth on the schools, and I understand how would you be amenable to only building so many homes per year, at least so that the school would be able to budget, be prepared for that growth instead of all of it at once, if we're getting 60, 70, 800 kids a year. I mean, that's their concern.
I'll let Matt answer the numbers part, but this isn't a school finance hearing. It's a zoning hearing.
I understand that.
Schools
I'm
have
asking the
independent
question.
ability to raise money and zoning isn't school finance and vice versa. And I guess the documentation we have provided, they should look at. But it came from public information from their information. We are gonna overproduce the money it costs to educate each child. And a question on the table is, what is their average student produce for every new house? Most growth areas, it's 0.8 kids per unit. But that's a question we have for them that they didn't answer. But, we have shared that information for them. We'd like them to audit it and have them apply their numbers to it. But it looks like we're gonna fund and then some for the kids that are produced. Matt can answer the question about numbers, permits.
Yeah, a couple things, in terms of total number of permits, it's something we might be willing to consider, but it is, I do wanna, note that in the estimates, whether it's 45 or 70 per year, a mix of those are gonna be the empty nester homes, or, probably, not quite half of them, but 40%, and those, again, aren't gonna bring nearly the number of kids per year. The other thing, I just want to, when Tom said we're going to create excess, I think we're going to work the tax revenue generated for the school district is out of this community would be nearly double what the school district currently gets in property taxes district-wide. And we've looked at the numbers, we've run our projections, we provided those to the school district for their verification. We do want them to audit those. But, we out of this community, with a mix of empty nester, would more than double the amount of property taxes per student than what they currently receive district-wide from real estate taxes. And I think it's also important to think that there are cycles. If this is a 5 or 7 or 8 year project, some of these kids might move in when they're a sophomore, and by the time we reach the end of the community, they graduate from high school, they're out of the community. Some of them may be kindergarten and they're still in for the life of it. But at the end of there's lots of factors there. I think it's something we're willing to consider, but it does have a challenge with respect to the business plan that I'd have to consider and give you an answer on.
And those tax dollars are all based on your average sales price that you've formulated, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how do you come up with that? You don't have to drill down into the weeds, but from 30,000 feet, how do you come up with the estimated average sales price?
Yeah, well, we've studied the market, and right now all the numbers that we're calculating that generation off of is we're using the exact same numbers we're using in our internal underwriting for the project.
Okay.
And I'll just give you an example, and I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but right now there's empty nester, patio home style community, homes being built over at the Cumberland Trails golf course.
Yeah.
And those are transacting in the 340s, 350s, I think, maybe even 360s. I think I've actually got data on it here, but so I'm going off the top of my head. We're under that, so we're being conservative in our projections. I think we're using 334, 339. So we're probably 15 to 20,000 under what the market's projecting. And we also base that off our comparable communities where we're selling the same types of homes, style of homes. And we do the same thing for single family. We look at the market, we look at what homes are selling for, what we've been able to sell similar homes for in the market, and that's how we come up with our pricing. And it's what we use for our internal underwriting, and what we use to make sure that it's a viable business plan for us.
Sure.
Same numbers.
If you take a look at like areas like Powell or Galena, which I consider to be higher end or maybe more affluent areas than Etna Township, where you might be able to get a higher price, it seems like you're really not too far off from those projected values.
Yeah, I would.
Not values, I guess sales price, selling price.
Just something to add, in our presentation last year, we got a slide on that long presentation that documented the market for that product. It gave existing Pulte communities all over, including Galena, right?
Yep.
But it also had some Wood County communities. It documented what the market, what the advertised price is and what the market's bearing for actual sales. So that's a big part of how the market does determine it. We're a baby booming downsizing tsunami. We've got a whole generation of people with my hair color who are moving into that product. That's why today I gave you some data from Etna, which is a big patio. They are one of the market leaders, and if you're in a home building business, you can't build enough of that product, and that is rising. That is raising the price. Those people are more settled economically. They're different time in their lives, and they're used to finishes. They're kind of moving in these patio homes, and they're not leaving the granite countertops behind. And that is driving the price somewhere.
If I could just add on to that, Mr. Ford. This is from the last presentation, and on this side of the the right side where we analyze some of our existing patio home communities. These communities are in Westerville, the Old Kansas School District, one in Pickerington, Galena, and Hilliard. And our average backlog at that time was 360,000 in those communities. And the closings year to date had been 354,000. So our prices were going up, the values were going up. And so, you know, we're 20,000 plus under those communities is what we're projecting here. And similarly, 20,000 less than what we're currently selling for right here in the market at Cummington.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that.
How are you going to address, and Mr. Johnson's already brought it up, and we've taken recommendations from the zoning commission asking for a 37 decrease. And I mean, they sat through the same presentation I assume that we did. How do we get over that? Hold on. Yes, sir.
Yeah, here, back here.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to lean into the microphone.
You might ask the gentleman from the zoning commission who's here, but my memory of that, it was never discussed. There was no debate. There was no discussion of what the code says. At the end of that hearing, he just put that in a condition. He didn't ask us about it. There was no debate. I did tell him it doesn't fit any kind of business plan that's going to work. That is a devaluation of that property. It doesn't equate, you know, to buy 62 acres and put in 2 miles of bike paths and retrofit sidewalks and make traffic improvements. You have to have code density. That is well below what the code allows in density. And respectfully, that gentleman, when he said 10%, that was a very definition of arbitrary and capricious. Just threw it out there. And when he did ask about it, I said it doesn't work in a business plan. It's frankly, that's a level of lot count that's below what the existing zoning would allow. So, you know, he's asking for 10% reduction.
How is it, explain what you just said about that it's a lower lot count.
We've mapped out an RS plan. Okay, it's pretty much the successor zoning that New England Acre has, and that I believe that comes to about 348 lots. So you know we could match New England Acres under your code, and the 10% haircut's less than that. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work in the market. We can't do it. And that's a plan where you eliminate all that open space. There's no bike path, there's no connection for walking trails, there's no retrofit of sidewalks. You know, we call it the ugly plan because it's not something Pulte would do. 40% open space, the kind of buffers we're doing, the bike path, the traffic improvements, those are positives, those are good things, those are good precedents. A 10% haircut doesn't get you there. You can't pay for it that way. And we do have a copy of that plan if you'd like to see it. We did map it out.
Of the RS?
RS.
Maybe later.
Yeah, maybe later. But that's,
And you said 350 with RS?
I think it's 348.
Isn't that ballpark?
I think it's my memory, but I think it's 348.
but ours is our, most is,
No,
correct or not?
no, your PRD2 allows 3 units to the acre.
I think RS is the same thing.
There's a lot of green space requirements for period too.
Yes, that's a big difference.
Yep.
So it is RS is our move.
RS is 1/3 acre minimum.
PRD2,
It's RS.
what is PRD2?
PRD2 is 3 dwelling units, with the density bonus, 3 dwelling units per acre.
Is that based on the property as a whole, or with roads and that kind of stuff taken into account?
as it's written, it is 3 dwelling units per net developable acres.
And that development, okay, so that's after the roads and everything else.
Yes, and that's approximately 30 and a half acres.
And we followed that definition.
Yeah, that's falling, so it's like, you got, so you're saying it's 120, 123, whatever you've got here.
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that RS would be roughly a third, so 3 times that, so you're still at the same number on this.
But the RS plan, again, it reflects New England acres, there's 0 open space.
The block.
It's, you gotta comply with stormwater, and that's there's no buffer, there's no. And again, PRD 2 requires 15% open space.
Is that it?
This is what we call the ugly plan. Yeah.
You know, I like that.
I'd like to add, New England acres is 178 houses. in the
Excuse me,
surplus.
excuse me.
Just happening.
No.
Well,
The
back to
public
back.
hearing portion's over.
Oh, thanks. Keep it as secure as possible.
One of the things about the density we're asking for, again, it lets you do things like the traffic control, that, you know, internal roundabouts, you know, the narrowing we would propose, that costs money. That's pavement, concrete, design engineering. This kind of plan, you don't have the yield, and with a 10% haircut, we wouldn't have the yield to buy that open space, to make those improvements, to calm traffic, to have almost 2 miles of bike path, to retrofit the sidewalks. You know, that's why we think our plan's better, because it's 200 feet of buffer from, I mean, it's visible. It's 200 feet of setback from Palmer Road. It's 100 feet buffer on the south and east. That plan just puts people's lots up against the existing lots in the same way the development pattern's always been. But you can't cover what makes a community more livable, what makes it better. That's open space, that's bike paths, that's pedestrian safety.
A lot of this, you've just extended people's backyard, is what you've done. You've opened it up so the yard looks bigger by putting it into the open space.
That's right. And what we believe is that, you know, we are proposing in one of our changes to turn over the recreational areas of our site to the township's ownership. We would maintain it.
It's a selling point, this is a great selling point. Look how much bigger your yard is because you're on open space.
Well,
I mean, that's a smart business, I think.
the market has moved in a direction where buyers today don't want that kind of yard. They want common open space that you know, they pay to maintain. And that is, you know, that is the difference.
How do you see potential problems with, I guess, with this open space being, I mean, we've had people, I guess I'm asking this question down the line. I'm looking down the line, 15, 20 years, you know, people, it's all developed out, it's all there. People may mow out here, next thing you know, they got their doghouse out here, or they got their, whatever else set up out here. And their yard just kind of evolves out there. It goes into the farmer's fields around here.
Right.
People are always out in the farmer's field with their little barbecue pit or whatever.
It's a common issue.
Right, so then it becomes theirs, then they don't want people walking behind their house, and how have you built that, if that's passed another lot,
Matt,
or another neighborhood?
Matt's got a lot of neighborhood experience with that. I do too, actually.
Maybe you can insight on that.
It's constant enforcement. It's setting up the HOA, the homeowner association documents from the beginning, where that HOA has enforcement authority to make sure it says you cannot encroach and build a doghouse or, you know, take over a common area that's not yours. That has to stay common. But it's constant vigilance. But, you know, they've got a national footprint of you know, making sure that's enforced. Once it's turned over and the HOA is run by the residents, there is some, you know, call it Texas justice that happens when people rat each other out and, hey, he's encroaching into the common space where my kids play. That's not his lot. That does work. But an HOA has to have the will and the finances to take enforcement steps to stop that. Now, you know, we've done other things where we've demarcated exactly where the property lines are, so it doesn't happen by accident. A lot of that in this case would be done with different mowing patterns, where a lot of the open space we're proposing would be naturalized, and be like a meadow. And so, you know, encroachment in those areas would stand out like a sore thumb, and it'd be something that would draw attention. Again, with one of the things that helps that, honestly, is the walking path. Because, you know, what you end up having is a couple 300 inspectors who walk around and look at everything, see everything on a regular basis. And that does tend to, as I referred to, maybe it's Central Ohio justice, not Texas justice, but that does tend to work. I don't know if you have a different answer to that.
Yeah, another thing we're doing, I was actually looking for this in the text, because I thought we had it in there, I can't find it on a quick scan. We oftentimes will put bollards at the rear property corners of the lots that abut to the open space. So like every other lot corner, we put like a 4x4 wood bollard in there that designates the rear of the property line, so it also becomes extra clear where the yard stops and where the open space stops, or where the yard stops and the open space starts. The other thing that isn't, that I was able to find in the text is signage that complies with, of course, have to comply with the township zoning code on signage, but we do put up signage throughout the designated open spaces as well. That's all part of it. That becomes part of and helps with the enforcement.
Brandon, you said you wanted to go through the staff report from LCPC.
I do, and I think they've addressed a lot of this. The TIS, the traffic impact, has that been reviewed and approved by the county engineer?
It has not. It's still in the review process. We had correspondence with the county engineer within the past week. I think their office, unfortunately, like so many others, has been impacted by COVID with their staffing, but they did assure us that the review was in process.
Okay.
So.
I just add, their enforcement authority is independent zoning. It continues. It usually is played out when they see if we're successful. I mean, they're not going to put their final touches on a traffic study unless we have a zone. Right. But then in the final engineering process, having said that, I mean, it's pretty clear what conclusions in terms of improvements and what they're looking for in terms of contributions and improvements are going to be. Because our engineers, came up with that, and we're subject to any changes or additions or additional contributions that the county or ODOT would come up with. And I will say the one way, as Mr. Carlisle pointed out, that would change some of our flow for sure. We'd have north flow traffic from other communities coming through, and that could cause our contribution, to offsite intersections to go up.
Coming off of 204 through New England Acres?
Yeah, I mean, that variance, just one context point is the subdivision regulations of this county call for those connections to be two ways. So that's why we would have to follow variance. But if we're successful, we're gonna send more traffic to Palmer. All of our traffic and some from the other communities.
Okay. I think we've already addressed lot sizes and the number of homes. So they make a comment in here, and I was unclear as to whether this was addressed or not, so I'm gonna bring it up, and if it's already been addressed, Sylvia.
What page are you on?
LCP staff review. The proposed zoning text appears to, and I guess this is something more that the township needs to address.
Yeah, I mean, if I could comment, I'd like to on that point. He made some recommendations that are inappropriate in this kind of staff report. You know, he was supposed to review an art plan against the current code and the current comp plan, not tell the township how to rewrite their zoning code. That just, it's irrelevant to our case that he has a personal or the county has a policy that they want to see you guys have a different code. Okay, you know, deal with that through John and through the, you know, your legislative authority. But there's some things in this staff report that are highly inappropriate in terms of staff reports we normally see and what we would expect, and that's one of them. So we file with what your code is, not what he thinks it should be.
Gotcha.
Because that's the law. I guess I was most disappointed with his report in the fact that he didn't talk about what the comp plan says in terms of open space, contiguous blocks of open space, pedestrian connectivity, the fact that your comp plan and code recognize the market's changing. Some people, there are areas in this part of the township where suburban density is appropriate. And, you know, he showed some bias against small lots. I'm sorry, you know, the empty nester patio home movement is a fact of life. You can't stop it, and your code allows it. And that seemed like a personal opinion that shouldn't be in a staff report.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
And this may don't take the question the wrong way, but I'm just gonna straight out ask it then. I mean, how are you gonna make this development a rural atmosphere development?
Yeah, and that was a lot of the discussion at the zoning commission. The main way is the buffering. A 200-foot setback from Palmer Road, you know, keeps the flavor of the open spaces of the township from an aesthetic feel, from how it feels when you're driving by that road. 200 feet helps. The 100-foot buffers in the south, you know, and on the east, again, what people see from, you know, the distance, we have an exhibit on this, the distance between back of home to back of home on the east side is very significant, because they got large lots right up to the property border.
You're saying on your map here?
Yes, sir.
The site here?
Yes, sir. Matt has a flow over that. They have large lots right up to the property line. We have now 100 foot of buffer, plus the back of the lots, plus the yard, then the house. We're talking about a couple, you know, football fields. We're getting into several hundred feet. You know, what people don't seem to get over is you can't ignore our 62 acres of open space. The existing communities, their open space is in the back of their lot. That's what they wanted, that's what they chose. In this community, open space is common, but it's there. It didn't go away, it's there. And so, I think, Jeff, that's the number one answer. I also think, you know, what you do with your street trees, how you incorporate trees in those buffer areas, how you put trees along those walking paths. We have some nice landscape exhibits that show all that, because we're adding.
That's in the development plan. We'll see
Yes,
that.
sir. We're adding that detail, but we do have it in our landscape exhibit, you know, as a commitment now.
I see a lot of water, and water doesn't allow for kind of a rural area. It has to go up to the edge, it has to.
Right. Well, the water's there, the water.
Pass the same way, you gotta mow around those too. I guess.
Yeah, typically we have a short distance of mowing to delineate the path, but it's mainly gonna be meadow. But the ponds are there out of necessity, that's
Right.
required, and we will make some drainage improvements in the area. I don't know if you have a different answer, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and actually, Tom just said, I was gonna tag on to it, but we do typically throughout a majority of that open space, not necessarily at the entrance, where, you know, a manicured entrance is usually preferred. But through a majority of the open spaces throughout the site, we use a low maintenance prairie or meadow type grass that doesn't, you know, it creates more of a rural, natural, look and feel to it. And B, it costs less to own and maintain for the homeowners association. That's just part of the overall look.
Is this on your old scale drawing, this distance here to here?
It should be up to date.
This is with the 100, this is what it looks like the 100?
Yes, so you got.
Oh, I see it under now, I didn't see it. Right.
85, 100, and
Okay.
your setbacks.
I didn't know if it was the old one, new one, I see it now.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I guess we, you know, again, it's a choice, but that 100-foot buffer is owned by the HOA in the end, unless the township wants that part of it. Well, you know, my understanding is we have proposed that the township, you know, we convey, the township take the recreational amenities of the open space, but the homeowners still pay to maintain them, but the township actually owns them, so they can't turn into something else. Our deed restrictions would also protect against that. But I guess the point is, that 100-foot buffer, the difference is, you know, the 85-foot on the back of someone's lot, they can do whatever they want back there within township rules. The 100-foot is restricted, you can't change it. It'll always be a buffer.
So what is your response to Brad Mercer's from LCPC's comment that the proposed lot sizes aren't supported by our current comprehensive land use map? Where's that?
My response is it's inaccurate.
Starting price point for the development.
I guess my point, Randy, is I don't know why he's even doing that. Why is he getting into price comparisons? If he wanted that, we could have given him actual prices all day long, as we have here. It showed a bias that is not appropriate. And he's making a non-binding recommendation as well. You know, I do this in a lot of jurisdictions. I've been doing it a long time. I just haven't seen that kind of thing before. And I don't agree with it. I guess you know that. It would have been also appropriate, Randy, if he would have said, but the PRD2 code says 3 units to the acre are encouraged, you know, west of Maine. He didn't cite that. He didn't cite the part of the comp plan that calls for that large open space block. This site planning is like an amoeba. I mean, if you push it one area, it pops out another. You know, you can't get to 40% open space without empty nester patio homes. And to ignore that that's a major factor in the market, it doesn't make any sense. If you value open space, you have to allow variation in lot size. And that's why we filed with the MUP.
Gotcha.
So what are the differences? I guess I'd like to know the differences between what you're proposing versus the PRD2 comparison side by side. Have you done that?
Yeah, we did it in kind of delineating, you know, when I wrote the PMUD, I was using the PRD2, because it fit the most, and again, that statement about west of Main. The biggest difference, Mr. Carlisle, is the 40% open space and the buffers. The extent of the buffers.
John, the PRD2,
Yes, sir.
what is I know we have the bonus.
Yes.
Have you done any calculations from the proposal to the PRD2 side-by-side comparison?
No, sir, I mean, I haven't pulled up right here. As far as, actually I don't have it written down.
That's fine, I'm just asking if you.
Yes.
Could you pull that information together? I think it would be helpful.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hart, I don't even know if this is allowable or not, but do you have any statistical data on your patio homes, your empty nester homes, on the actual percentage that are truly purchased by an empty nester and not a family? Again, I don't even know if that's something you can ask, but.
What we provided you, and we did it only an email today, so it was new, but what we provided you is, we provided you data from the market leader of empty nester patio home construction. In fact, that's all they build, and I work for them.
Epcom? Okay.
And what we did is, we took it from public hearings where they provided such data in other jurisdictions, particularly Hilliard and Old Canby, because they build a lot there, and there's frankly a welcoming in those jurisdictions of that type of product, because high value, low kids, high property tax, low kids. And so what, we did exactly that, Randy. We gave you what they turned in on those points, and now you know it by heart. Their occupancy, and Pulte has very similar experience, very similar product, head-to-head competitor. Pulte has trouble, you always have trouble providing data about people, about your customers, right? So we chose to use the data that was public, that Epcom had reported generally. Their general occupancy is 1.5 people per unit. It's less than 2 people. And frankly, we have a trend in our society where a lot of people are choosing to live alone. It is what it is. So their data is under 2 people. Somebody loses a spouse, people get divorced, they're buying these empty nester patio homes because they're so easy to maintain. But they're expensive. I know the numbers off the top. In the Hilliard School District, that company has 6 completed communities that go back 30 years. 6 total. 418 total units. 418. The last time they looked, they had 2 kids attending public schools. Because when you put both essentially 2 master bedrooms down, and you limit the second floor space, and you charge fees to take care of snow removal and landscaping, and you're charging extra money so that these people don't mow their own yards, they don't take care of mulching, they don't do seasonal weeding. When you do that, when you offer, a walking path, which is the #1 thing really any age group wants, but those people especially, you build it, they come. And that 418 unit count in that community in Hilliard, they don't age restrict at all. They don't say, they don't try to do the federal safe harbor for age restricting. They just build these patio homes that suit those folks. And they're getting 400 plus for them. So Matt's numbers here, Pulte's numbers here are conservative because in the market in other places, those people are well-heeled. They're coming out of selling a single-family house at a high market right now. And they are succeeding into a smaller footprint of living, and a lot of times by themselves and with very few kids. In the Olde district, they're close to 1,000 units. It's a very large school district. And they're under 60 in terms of the kids that are produced from that number. And I did provide you that in an email today.
Okay, thank you.
And part of what happened is they put those statistics in the hearing records in front of public bodies like this, so it's readily available to anyone.
Gotcha.
I'd also make a point, we made this point before with regard to the school district. Based on what business we're in, we know the superintendents of those two districts real well, because there's a lot of business in Hilliard and Olde over the last 10, 20 years, really. And we know what they think of empty nester patio homes, and we know what they'll say about them in terms of few kids and a lot of tax value. And so we encourage the board or anybody else to call those people. They're good, solid professionals. They'll tell you the truth, and it ain't us talking.
And that's where, Hilliard?
The Hilliard superintendent or treasurer, and the Olde superintendent. And I think in that case, it's the business manager that handles development questions. And their names are online.
I've got another question for you.
Yes, sir.
Say that you didn't tie in here, you didn't tie in here, you didn't tie in here. Would this still be feasible for you?
Yes.
This plan?
Yeah, mainly because we're making the improvements on Palmer Road that are required to accommodate the traffic safely. It's a widening and turn lanes.
And these were put in because of E County? When did you put these in? Is that correct? Or when you drew this thing, you drew these into these streets?
Yeah, because the subdivision regs require that. We have to get a variance for them to be one way. But we have no option, Jeff, of showing up in Licking County anywhere and saying we're not gonna tie them. They'll just make us tie them.
Will
So-
stop traffic in its entirety coming through New England Acres? Could you make them safety blocks? That the fire department would be able to use them, but the general public not?
There's a walkway in with a drive.
There has been a lot of discussion about that in township law circles about kind of the safety of different types of, if you're saying a raised.
For safety purposes, what I'm saying, because I know LCPC has a requirement of 2 entrances, 2 exits. You have that on Palmer. My question is would it be feasible for you to use those and submit those as only used for emergency access only?
That is what we were proposing. I mean, we have traffic calming in the form of roundabouts, and then we're proposing that those stubs be one way. Are you saying
I'm
in
talking
addition
about
to?
not one way, emergency access only, or breakaway bowlers. That would take all traffic out of New England.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we have my own personal opinion, Matt and Barry, you have your own experience. We're more likely to get a one-way with emergency 2-way than we are zero, just emergency is what we believe. But whether the county engineer would approve some other type of traffic calming, we have talked to the Violet trustee, and they don't. I mean, this township and Licking County can do as it sees fit on your side. But we know that some of those devices they don't support.
Do you wanna add something to that, Mr. Callahan?
I was just gonna reiterate really what Tom, or I was gonna say what Tom said, which is I think we're probably more likely to get one way with two-way emergency. I mean, we could always ask for the, emergency only and no, standard traffic and make that request. I think being realistic, I think it's probably, the most that they would agree to is a one-way with two-way emergency only. I think we'd be willing to make that request, but again, it's just, as Tom said earlier, that's a decision that's gonna be out of our hands and rely, probably entirely with the county, primarily the engineer, and planning commission.
Mine was basically a follow-up to Jeff's question, that you asked if it was feasible.
Yeah, that was, because basically I heard we can't go below 350 because we can't make any money, which I understand. But, okay, so one of the big issues is the traffic through here is a huge issue to these people that have these other places. I think you've done a good job of buffering between them. I think you've done a good job of keeping the high density away from this area. I think you cut the traffic off of there, I'd be more favorable to it at that point. I mean, if there was a way to do that. I think it answers a lot of the questions that people had. I mean, it's not all of them, but I mean, it'll address a bunch of them.
Well, we're committing to filing that variance, and we're not just gonna sit there, we're gonna try to pursue it hard. We have a way, we know how to talk to people, we hope the right way at the county level and try to get it done. I will tell you, we also did some other analysis of, the cut-through traffic issue. We had a traffic engineer look at that, and it's actually more limited than maybe people observe in their daily life and they feel and see in terms of what he found. It's hard to tell somebody that, there's not people speeding outside their house, but the actual number of cut-throughs is actually very limited. And we have that documentation too.
John, do you know the answer to that question? Did you find out? Oh, we're not gonna ask. Chris? What's the question? Whether or not they include for emergency access.
I think, I'd like to review the changes. I think we should submit this to Richard Jones with the school and see what his thoughts are on this. Email that over. I don't think it makes sense that we can start with the text yet.
I'm inquired about this stuff, and I feel maybe choose lot types.
That's why I asked John to ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of answer I got. We wanted to do that. It's, choose not to and ask for it.
Jeff, can you say that again? I'm sorry, I couldn't
Well,
hear you.
I said, I've inquired about not having these roads go through. And I was told, well, you could always choose to not have them go through, but they want them to go through. I'm saying the county wants them to go through there. So you have to.
I would like to have a more definitive answer
Right,
than that.
but that's the answer I got. I got a real big answer for what I was asking over there, so. That was the answer I got. So they're saying it's not impossible to do, but I'll let you have that.
I'm inclined to agree with Randy. I don't wanna get into this text tonight. I mean, we're looking at 6:30 already. We're going on 2 hours. I would like for, Randy, will you get this over to Mr. Jones?
Yep,
And ask him
sure
to do
will.
an analysis on it. John, those 2 questions that I asked you, you can follow up on.
I personally think, are you guys okay if I would like to reach out to, the appropriate people at Hilliard and Olentangy also and see what get feedback from them on the tax revenue versus the number of students and what kind of an impact it. Yeah, do you wanna do that? Okay. Do you have that document? Yeah, please.
Yep. Now,
Yes.
hearing date. After tonight, when are you, when would you like to do the next? A week from tonight, Monday, Laura, is this available Monday?
The only thing I have left for lunch is the Tuesday night commission meeting, that's
That's on Tuesday.
Tuesday nights, and then after that, I don't have anything until Thursday.
I would prefer.
Do we do Monday
I
night?
would prefer to do it either one. I wanna make sure we get it on time. And we don't know how fast we're gonna get back.
Gotcha.
Today's the 9th. Are you available the 16th? A week from today is a Wednesday.
I am now,
Got an answer for him?
Yes, you can.
Yes, we're available.
Then let's set, that, I wanna make sure that Mr. Singleton has enough time, Mr. Jones has enough time to review this information. I have enough time to review these documents that you've provided. It might answer some of the questions that I already have. So there's no sense in going through it and have to review through two sets of documents. So, let's set the next meeting for, Laura, you can prepare an agenda for this, for December the, 16th, 5 o'clock.
Yep.
Jeff? 5 o'clock, and then we'll come back and hopefully we'll have all the answers between Mr. Singleton. You're gonna do the, I'm gonna recap everything here. You're gonna do a ERD2 and their proposal side-by-side comparison. You're going to do, contact Hilliard and Olentangy schools in regards to the tax document. Or is he sending this over to Richard Jones or you?
I will.
Okay, Mr. Ford will send that over to them. Mr. Singleton, you're going to contact LCPC in regards to emergency access only on those three entrances, those three existing. Yes, sir. Okay.
We're talking about the 3 existing stub roads, correct?
Yes, we'll just make it definitive. We're talking about Old Post, Cape Cod Way, and Faneuil Hall. Just for the record, those are the three roads that's in discussion. Fair enough, gentlemen?
Yeah, that'll work for us. I just was gonna mention the information that, we both handed out to you today, or tonight, pardon me, as well as emailed into the township today, was also forwarded to the school district, today as well. So they should have that, just so you know, obviously, John can follow up, but, we have provided that to them as well.
Mr.
And ask
Ford,
them
you
to
can
just-
follow up with
This
that.
document, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
all that information, we gave it to them.
Do you know who you sent it to?
Mr. Jones, for the superintendent, and, I think the member of the board that testified previously.
Andy Snyder?
That was her.
Andy Snyder Engel?
Yes,
President?
She's the president, yeah.
yeah, I believe that was right.
Well, in that case, I'm not gonna resend it, Mr. Jones, when you asked about him taking a look at that. Are you doing something else with the school?
No.
Okay, never mind, I'll take care of it.
I would say we would like it if you asked them to look
Yeah.
at it, because we asked them before.
You have a comment?
No.
Second.
For second discussion. Roll call. You know, Mr. Rogers,
Jeff Johnson,
Yes.
Mary Ford,
Yes.
yes, 6:37.
You're in trouble over there. That mess you made in our nice township hall. The mess you made in our nice township hall. Tell you're a farmer, right?
All the handouts he handed out, stuff he emailed to John, I'm more worried about making sure my phone file has everything, public records for what time did you send it?
What they're doing,
No, that I
they're
didn't
using,
get it.
they're using the
Mine's at
RF,
Township
which
at-
is actually a lot smaller, but there is no RF. Well, there is RF stuff.
I'm just more worried at the end of all of this, that I have to end the file in case something comes up.
As far as I can tell.
Look good.
A lot bigger.
I think he gave me everything but this, other than the,
Yeah.
Jeff gave me one that, Jeff gave me one that he didn't.
Oh, sure.
I'm more worried about the outside stuff, even if it's.
Yeah, I'm with the local paper, I just want to make sure I got your name spelled correctly, it's Tom, H-A-R-T, and you're in the
I'm more worried about the public records.
Matt Kaufman? Gotcha, okay. I thought that might be the case.
Hey, Tom, question for you. Do you have a copy of those handouts that you gave to them so I can put on? No? Okay, that's a shame, because I think it was, okay, well, that's a shame, because I think there was some good improvements, and I wanted to share that with everybody, but. Well, wish you would cooperate. Laura?
Send me an email with this minute.
And then, you also audio.
I'm not back in the office right now.
Whenever you get it, so I can overlay it again.
I can have
We're getting a new camera system, it's supposed to be in today, but tomorrow, so we'll be able to stream, better audio.
I forgot I can drop off.
Okay, yeah, oh yeah, thanks.